morning, everyone. I am Mayor Bethany H. Clarkston. This is the special city council meeting agenda for Wednesday, June 25, 2010. I'll start with Vice Mayor Johnson, Councilman Carroll, Councilwoman Bell, Councilwoman Hill, Councilman Perkins, Councilwoman Hood, and I'll recognize City Manager Julia Norton. This time we have public comments. Would like to have comments as it relates to the millage rate. We will have a public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up for public comments at this time?
Just for the public hearing.
Okay, thank you. With that, we'll proceed with new business, starting with A, presentation and discussion of the proposed 2025 millage rate, and that will be done by our city manager, Miller Thornton.
Good morning. In 2025, the administration presented to Mayor and Council the 2025 millage rate scenario based on preliminary digest assessment. Collected with the previous year's digest at the previous year's millage rate. Upon calculation of the rollback rate, it was determined that the rollback rate would be 13.664 mills, which is a decrease in the current mill rate of 13.890. However, based on assessment of the city's budget versus the mill rate scenario and the rollback rate, it was determined that the rollback rate would not present the amount of revenue necessary to fund the 2025 budget. Upon further analysis, it was also determined that it is assumed by the administration that the budget was adopted based on 100% collection of property taxes. However, the city has a history of receiving about 82% of its taxes as billed. So the administration presented to council a scenario by which the revenue at the collection rate of 82% would be analyzed. At 19.298 mills is the millage rate that would be required to balance the city's budget based on, the adoption of the 2025 budget back in December. Therefore, this was the rate that council tentatively adopted with the, hopes of having the administration to further analyze the budget and to determine whether or not there would be any room for, budget adjustments that will allow for a reduction in the final millage rate. As you can see on the screen, at the current millage rate of 13.890, the city would experience a almost $7 million deficit in revenue collections at 82%. At the 19.298 mill rate, the city would experience, $187 approximately above the budgeted revenue. The 19.298 mill rate would, experience a 41.23% increase in taxes, which would result in approximately $563.40 increase annually for a home with a fair market value of $275,000. So that's a $563 increase for the year. A non-homestead property with a fair market value of $925,000 would experience an increase, a tax increase of about $2,112.75 for the year. So in the interim of the tentative rate of 19.298 and final adoption of the rate on June 26th, the current assumption is that the 2025 budgeted revenues have been overstated, and therefore funding was assumed for the substantial increase in budgeted expenditures for 2025. The response is going to be, anytime there's a reduction in revenue expectancy, that places a burden on the city to do, one of three things: to either increase taxes, to significantly reduce expenditures, or to burden the city's general fund balance in order to balance the budget. The goal is to strike a good balance between the budget, taxation, and, a healthy fund balance, and still ensuring that there's no negative impact on service delivery. Over the last, few days, for a couple of weeks, actually, the administration has completed an updated mill rate scenario and presented it to council, in the last day or so. We have recognized a reduction in payroll and related expenditures in the amount of $549,953. This estimate includes, implementation of a hiring freeze on a number of vacant positions that were budgeted in 2025. This decrease in expenditures is approximately $298,000. A delay in the hire date for additional positions, approximately $128,000, with a total estimate reduction of $425,611. Estimated salary and wages reduction plus associated payroll taxes is approximately $458,170. This reduction also includes an implementation of previously budgeted cost of living increase at 3%, that was set to take effect the first full pay period in July. This cost is approximately $67,773, to provide a cost of living increase for all employees, all current employees at 3%, and those employees that are set to be hired, in a delayed implementation. The $549,953 reduction in budget also includes the reimbursement of general fund salary expenses that's due from the city's, American Rescue Plan Act fund. That cost is estimated at $159,556. So at the time of budget adoption, council decided to have, three of his positions funded, three of his current positions funded with, ARPA funds. And so the general fund was adopted with the expense in the general fund with the expectation that the ARPA fund would transfer monies to the general fund to pay for those positions. Um, Total estimate of decrease again is $549,953. So based on, decrease in budget of just over $500,000, it is anticipated that currently a mill rate of 17.528 will be required to meet budgeted revenue as estimated at a collection rate of 82%. Adoption of this rate will result in 28.28% property tax increase. This is a 1.77 mil reduction from the tentatively adopted rate of 19.298, and the 17.528 mil rate is 3.864 mils higher than rollback rate of 13.664 mils. This proposed tax increase will, for a home, with a fair market value of $275,000, will be approximately $386.40, more in property tax for a homestead property. That's for the year. This is a decrease from the $563 that was previously advertised with the tentative rate. Proposed tax increase for a non-homestead property with a fair market value of $925,000 is approximately $1,449. This is a reduction from the $2,000 increase that was tentatively adopted at 19.298. So, the updated mill rate, I wanna make a note, that updated mill rate of 17.528 assumes no additional contribution of the city's general fund balance to balance the current year's budget. In a scenario that includes general fund, allocation to balance the tax burden, of course, I think that the administration will want to be confident that the city's general fund is able to accommodate. And so, for example, it's estimated that if a 15.953 mil rate was adopted, the tax burden, the tax increase overall to all residents would be $611,000, citywide. The reduction in expenditures would be $549,953, and the general fund appropriation would be $492,013. So that balances the burden across all three aspects of funding. That's all.
Thank you, City Manager, and thank you to our financial director for all their hard work of reviewing and going back through and identifying a lot of the cost savings and a lot of the issues that you were able to find. Council, at this time, do you have any comments? Yes.
My question is for the city manager. How did we get here? I mean, some of this is new to us, being that we've already approved the budget. So, was there anything, did we calculate wrong, or did we anticipate 100% and only received 82%? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, ma'am. I think, it's my assumption and the finance director's assumption that the budget was adopted on an expectancy of 100% of tax, collected as billed. But the city's history is the collection of only 82% of all taxes, within the general fund. And so, we believe because of that, the revenue for 2025 was overstated. We continue to do analysis, and there are several other line items within the, revenue expectation for the 2025 budget that we are working to confirm. Some of those, revenue estimates seem a bit high based on the nature of the item, the revenue item or revenue stream. And so we're continuing to look at those. Hence, our reservation in assigning a substantial amount of general fund reserve to balance the budget.
Okay. Councilwoman Hood?
Yes, thank you. For the information that we used to establish the current year's budget, what was the estimated increase in our property tax digest? We know that it went up, and correct me if I'm wrong, 3.76 is what it actually has gone up. What was the estimate that was used?
I think we estimated just above, about 4.5%.
And do you happen to know how much the digest has grown annually?
I don't have that information right in front of me, but I may have some information relative to that in the, what I did include was, history of the mill rate, and the history of the value of the mill, but I did not include the increase in digest. And I would make a point to that. One of the things that's going to be a little bit difficult in just leaning to increase in digest in the coming years is this thing that's happening in the legislation regarding stabilizing the digest, right? And so I would contend that any previous kind of trend of increase in digest may not be relevant anymore due to like House Bill 581 and exploding homestead and stabilization. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, at this time, we will have, this is one of three meetings that we'll have. The next one is tonight at 6:30, and then we'll have the final one on the 26th at 6:30, correct? Okay, all right, with that being said, no additional comments from the council. I will now open it up for the public hearing on the proposed 2025 millage rate. And at this time, we'll allow people to have 3 minutes to speak. Who do we have signed up first? Carmen Medford? Okay, Mr. Medford.
First, anytime.
Please press the button. Thank you, sir.
Testing. 1, 2, 3. Okay. All right. Thank you so much for explaining how we got here. I really appreciate all the work it took to go through all that. I really do. Especially you're coming in cold into all this. So thank you so much. My concern is the dollar didn't go the same distance it did a couple years ago. Everything's gotten more expensive. So I know I've had to come out and try to find new business for myself to pay our bills. We need to start looking how we're going to, now that we know how much it's going to cost to run the city from now on, we need to start opening some doors that we have slammed shut hard multiple times in the past. Start thinking of ways to bring in more money. Folks, it's time to stop tap dancing around annexation. Stop doing a plan and forgetting about it, forget about it. We had a plan and we gave up and we slammed the door shut. We need more places to get money for the city. We need new development to bring this in. Okay, the East Avenue and Poplar development that I know is so popular with some people around here is gonna bring in $70,000 in taxes for the city next year when it's all sold. That's not a small chunk. That's gonna pay for a police officer easily. So stop slamming the door on potential ways to bring money into the city. Start taking it seriously and stop getting off the high horses and look at what's gonna take to pay the bills. I appreciate the hard work it's gonna take to solve this problem. I stood up here a couple of years ago when we were talking about what we're going to pay the police officers. I said, I can afford to pay more in taxes. And I can, and I am. I can cover the bill for this. My friend Renita down the street can't. Other people in this audience can't. They're on fixed incomes. So we can't just keep ratcheting up the taxes on the people who live here because it's going to hit rent too. I already did the math. Raising up the taxes, this is going to cost my neighbor $50 more a month on his rent if that's all they hold it to. So it's not just the people who own properties, people renting here too. They're getting hit by this. And it'd probably be more than that because we all know how honest the apartment owners are around here. So, this is a tough spot to be in. I'm not a finance manager, but I've run finances before, and it sucks. So it's going to be difficult. I really don't want to see any positions lost. I really don't. I value the people we've hired. I think we've done a lot of good work. I think you all done a lot of good work. But finding the way to make this fit, we'll fit it in this year. It's next year, the year after that. So time to look forward, fund this, and not just try to fix ways to keep cutting back. Thank you.
Do we have any member? Okay. Amy? And who's after, maybe?
Mike Marino.
A lot of it is I just want to sort of echo what Brian was saying. I know that it took a lot of work, so thank you so much for doing the tough work and the number crunching to get where we are. It's important to name and notice what happened to get us here. I don't care so much about who, what, when, as long as we just identify the practice and then move forward. I really want to hear how we're going to fix this going forward. What are your plans to prevent this? A crisis decision is just where we are is one thing. Like, yes, it sucks. Everybody's got to grit in and do it. I am very worried about those that are on the edge. Just because some people can look at this and be like, yeah, it's no big deal. That's not the majority of our population in the city. And this is going to pinch hard. And there may be people that end up having to lose their place over this. So take this crisis decision very carefully. And I want to know what you're going to do in the future, in 2026, 2027, 2028. What is 5-year us going to be at? Annexation seems like our only policy because homeowners cannot continue to bear the majority of all of city budget expenses. We have to either get new homes through development and through infill housing, increased density. I know that's your buzzword, but guess what? Here we are. It's time to reevaluate this and make some hard decisions. These are ways to increase our tax digest. Annexation is another one. We can all say we want new businesses, but that's fickle. The things we can control are annexing, getting in new housing, increasing density, increasing infill housing. Look out. What are you going to do to fix this? That's my concern.
Thank you.
Hi, thank you all. Really appreciate the clarification on the 40% property tax increase is what got me out here. 20-ish seems much more reasonable, but it still seems a lot. It's also very similar to the number of people that aren't paying property tax or the total amount of revenue. So that seems like the direct course of action. I don't believe I can get away with not paying property tax, at least for a few years in a row. I don't know all the background information, but it seems like no matter how much it costs, and I'm sure there would be a cost to go after and get that money, it's gonna be less than 1/5 of our budget. So instead of going after the people that pay every year and just putting all the burden on us or removing it from the general fund or not paying the people that we need to properly run the city, let's go after the deadbeats. There's gotta be some way to get that money. We're a city, right? We have a police and we have the ability to, I don't know, is it a business? Is it an apartment complex? There's gotta be some way to get this money. Instead of just squeezing like these guys are referring to, like, you know, the stone, right? So we get people on fixed income, lower income, I could afford maybe $500, but I don't want to do that every year for the rest of my life. And this is the first step, right? We had a 20% increase 2 years ago, 10% increase last year, another 20% this year. So let's go after the people not paying and shift the burden away from people that are actively engaged trying to help this community. So thank you all for your time. Appreciate you.
Thank you. Who else did we have signed up? And could you state your name again just for?
Mike Maisano. I didn't write it well. You 1009 Pecan Street.
Okay.
Thank y'all.
Thank you. Clerk Mitchell? Okay, so at this time, is anyone else willing to speak? And state your name.
My name is Debbie Gaffman. I'm at 928 Mill Avenue. I am really startled. I mean, I've been paying attention, but I think it really didn't sink into me about the 18% that aren't paying on time. And all the rest of us are, you know, if we have a mortgage, our bank is paying it, and then they just up our payments. There's so many ways that we could collect that money. I was talking to Brian about, we have a city attorney. Could letters be going out? Could we be suing? Could we actually move forward on something more serious? I'm sort of shocked that we haven't been collecting that money, because I used to work for, long ago, because I'm pretty old, CNS Bank. And when we had people that assumed a mortgage, you know, you checked their tax, what they had paid, and if they were behind, the bank coughed it up out of their bank accounts. I mean, nobody fooled around about it. I think this is not a current problem. It sounds like it was a past problem. And this should be the year that we get 36% of that money coming in, 18% from last year, and 18% more from this year. So we're not having to think we're only gonna get 82%. Plus the business license people who haven't coughed up their business license cost. That needs to happen like today. And I think if we have an attorney and we have a city councilman who's in the collection business, it seems like there's a way we could legally jump on this. Because both of those guys that spoke are correct. I'm on a fixed income. I don't know if I can pay what looks like will be $56 more a month on my house payment. I'm not sure I can do that. So let's get cracking on this. I'm pretty freaked out. I was freaked out from when you guys agreed to the 19% for advertisement purposes, because I knew that was not gonna drop back to 13 or 14. So let's get serious about it. I think today, somebody should be putting together letters with these apartment owners and saying, this is what we want to see. If we want to see it in a deadline by the 10th of July. That's my thought. I used to run a business and I sent out letters all the time. And it was to parents, people I loved, and had to say, cough it up by Friday or your child has to leave the school. I don't understand why we can't be a little more aggressive.
Thank you. Okay, with that, do we have anyone else? Do we have anyone else? Do we have anyone else? So I will close the public hearing. I will allow the city manager to speak at this time.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. I just want to make a point to manage expectations a little bit. The 82% that's collected is the percentage that is collected in the appropriate fiscal cycle. So in the budget cycle, right? We do have line items within our budget for the collection of prior year taxes, both personal and real, right? So, but typically those collections happen outside of the budget cycle. So you do not apply those funds to the previous year's or current year's budget, right?
I get
Right?
that.
So, additionally, there is what's called the Taxpayers Bill of Rights, right? And then there is the cycle by which the county bills the taxes, and there is also a cycle by which those taxes have to be paid before they can go to tax sale. So that's what drives the collection, right? The city, and I'm sure that we can talk to the city attorney, and I won't say but, and the general scenario is that you pay by November 15th, right? If you don't pay by November 15th, then that the collection doesn't go into default until the county or the city, if the city bills its own taxes, until the county or the city, puts the property up for tax sale. And tax sales in DeKalb County only happen on a 2-year cycle, right? So we could be collecting those past year's monies for a period of 2 years. We can't assign them to the budget that we expected to get the money in. That's why it's important to only anticipate collecting that about 82%. That's because our history shows that. But again, there are mechanisms to collect the money. They're just not on a cycle that's controlled by the city. Maybe at some point, and I don't want to just throw this in the atmosphere because this is something, but I think it warrants a note here. For instance, if the city built its own taxes, and I'm not saying that the city should, that's a feat in and of itself. Then the city has the opportunity to set its own tax sale cycle, right? So it can collect monies within a year as opposed to the 2 years that's set by the county.
Well, here's my question, and I'll talk loud. How does Tucker do it? How does Stone Mountain do it? Are they all in this boat?
So Debbie, thank you very much for that. And we'll have the city manager to follow up in terms of that, especially different options in terms of how we can collect the funding. And then that can be something in terms of a follow-up when we have a meeting with the CEO to discuss as one of those items. Part of our service delivery is how they do that collection for us. And so if that's something that is an issue for us, or if it's something that's a county issue, that we need to also make sure that we're mindful of that. So we can address that in terms of how do we deal with it from a service delivery perspective, because the expectation is if they're supposed to give us our money and they're the collector of the money for us, then what are they doing to ensure that we're getting our money? And so if we're at 82%, then we're not getting our money. Okay, so we can do the follow-up. Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passed, meeting adjourned. See you tonight.